Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. It is coffee break. I am Spencer Campbell, aka Gila RPGs. Coffee Break is a weekly show where I get to sit down with my fantastic friends in the indie RPG scene and just share a conversation and a cup of coffee or whatever it is that we might be drinking that morning. This week, oh my god, my chair just exploded, Jeff. Uh, I'm so excited to be sitting down here with the fantastic Jeff Stormer. Jeff, why don't you say hi to the folks?
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I am so excited. This is a wonderful way to kick off my Sunday, which is, as I was explaining to you just before we got live. This is going to be a great day to kick off my work day because I lost an entire day to playing Balatro yesterday. So I'm excited. This is a good kickoff to the office day.
Yeah, you mentioned Balatro right before we went live, so I know immediately what I want to talk about.
Right?
Um, but yes, I also find this to be a nice way to just sort of start the day, start the week. I always find that after I have coffee break, I'm like excited to do the work again,
I,
excited
I
to do the design stuff.
I love this. And that's how I often feel when I get the chance to sit down and watch it. I often feel the same way.
It's like, all right, we're doing it. There's
Yeah,
there's excitement. I'm not like alone by myself in this room, sad and overwhelmed. But
precisely. It's
there's
it's a it's a good energy.
it is real good energy. All right, Balatro, we have to talk about it.
Let's talk Balatro.
I'm so excited. So I only also recently kind of learned about this and fell down the rabbit hole. Logan Dean texted me and is like, "What do you think about poker hands for a resolution system?" I was like, "Yeah, it seems fine." He goes, "Cool. I've been playing a lot of Balatro," and I thought it was like a typo. I had no idea what the hell he had sent me, and I was like, "All right, sure." Then Will Yobst also reaches out and is like, "I've been playing a lot of Balatro lately," and I'm like, "What is going on right now?"
It it be like I mean it truly be like that. It's haunting is how I would describe this game.
I'm so, so I finally looked into it. I remember thinking, like, is this real? Like, everyone's freaking out about this? Is it that good? And yes, actually, in fact, it is
Yeah,
that good.
I had the same. So here's I'm gonna throw out a controversial statement right
Okay.
off the bat. Hit throw some gasoline on the fire of this coffee break. I don't really like video games.
Okay.
I'm just not a video game guy.
That's
Like
fine.
90% of like games like I sit down with and I try to like I try every time I try like there's various things that I bump off of like it's just not where I get my
It's
satisfaction like play satisfaction from.
okay.
That's how I will describe it. The exception is really like trivia and board game style games
Okay.
and gambling style games of which Balatro is all of the above and like it just has fallen into such a remarkable energy that has me hooked and I showed it to my wife, I showed it to Jen and it immediately also hooked her and we were going to bed. So I bought it on my laptop. She doesn't like playing games on her laptop, so she bought it on the Switch.
Nice.
And I watched her uh I watched her like carry the Switch to bed and I was like, I see what you're doing. Just so you know, I see what is unfolding here. I
It's
was like, I'm glad that we've both been infected in this way.
it's like it truly got its hooks in me, and now I just keep playing it. I keep playing it. That's such a thing for like rogue like games of like, oh, I'll just
Yeah.
do one more run. I'll just do one more run, and there's just something about the sound design,
Yep.
the kind of manic faces on all these jokers that are staring me down, taunting me, be like, "Don't you want to play a little bit more?" It's just I'm all in on Balatro. What are your like? Do you have like a particular strategy that you like to try to play to? Are you a full house kind of person? Or are
I'm
you a
starting to build a strategy.
okay?
I've got the seed of a theory that I'm working on. Like I'm still early enough in the game that I'm like working things out and I
Yeah,
have not like refined my approach, but I've keyed into I think what I at least want to try out for my next couple runs as the play, which is I am leaning towards the energy of two of like making my deck into two suits,
yeah,
changing everything into either hearts or spades. I think is the play that I want to chase after to see how it plays out, and then just lean hard on flushes and straight flushes.
yeah.
I think is the play.
I'm a flush man myself too. I'm all in on flushes as my. I've had the most success with flush decks. I've
I
found.
think just and like my worry is getting my shit wrecked by the going so hard on hearts and then having somebody go all of your hearts are worthless
Yeah.
shit. Which is
Then
why I'm like I gotta have a second suit in there. Like I gotta have it be split down the middle so that we've got energy.
there you go. You're thinking ahead. That's smart.
Thinking ahead. We're building the battle plan.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I have, similar to you, I've just sunk a lot of hours into that game just because it is just like, oh yeah, I can play another run. I can play another run. I could do that a little bit better. I could,
Yeah.
and like every time you do it too, like you're unlocking some new joker. It's like, ooh, this is this. Ooh,
Yeah.
I could go get that in the shop. I gotta
Okay,
go.
I can see how that's gonna play. I can if I put this with these other tools, I can see where this is gonna really shine.
Yeah, I'm curious if people who don't normally play a lot of video games, but are familiar with like gambling games and poker and stuff like that, if they would play something like Balatro, and if it would be a gateway into playing something like Slay the Spire, which again is a deck building roguelike game, but it's about like fighting your way up. It's very fantastical and everything. I wonder if
I
if there's a
I could
pipeline there.
I think there absolutely is. Like hearing you say that just now, I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I wrote off Slay the Spire. Like maybe I didn't look into it adequately. Like there's a lot of pieces of this game that I could see drawing me in, and like because I think like what it's really getting me thinking about is like when I say I don't really like video games, like which pieces of that experience do I bounce off of and what do I struggle like what do I bounce off of and what are the kind of games that don't indulge that? And so it's got me thinking about things.
Yeah. Well,
So
good.
I think that pipeline is there.
Excellent. I'm glad Balatro has opened up that space for you to be contemplative of that of your thoughts on video games. Who knows? Maybe Slay the Spire could be a fun next step for you.
You got me thinking about it.
Excellent. I love that. Well, Jeff, I'm so excited to just be sitting down and chatting with you. I've known you for a while through your fantastic show. Would you mind telling folks a little bit about it, just so that if they're not familiar, they can learn a little bit about it?
Of course, Talking Nog is a podcast I produce once a year of Christmas time about eggnog. Um, so I host a show called Party of One. I've hosted it since 2015, 8 years in October, 400 episodes in February, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Um, we have and what we do is we play a game. We are an actual play podcast focused on two-player role-playing experiences. We play a game every episode with a guest. We sit down one-on-one, different guest, different game every episode to, tell a story, get to know one another, share a really special experience and moment. We share some laughs, a few tears, and we have a really good time. And every episode, you get to hear a self-contained story that like shows off a little bit about like what a guest is interested in and what they're excited about and a little bit of like what motivates them and drives them, and you get to learn a new game in about 90 minutes. So it's a pretty special experience that I think about more than almost anything else in my life.
What a legacy, right? 8 years, 400 episodes of doing this thing. And I haven't listened to all 400 episodes,
All
but
right, well then this has been
yeah,
great.
this
I'm
is
gonna
the
head
end of the
out.
conversation. But have you like is it it's truly a new game every single time?
No, we've played a lot of like repeat games.
Okay.
It is a self-contained game session, but like in terms of systems, we have played a good number of repeats. I think the exact number of games that we have played, not counting episodes that we have pulled off the show for some reason or another, I think the number is around like 300 and maybe 310 over
Incredible.
410 episodes. So there's like a good number of like repeat systems, but that still holds the record. I've done the digging on this and I can say this with confidence. That does hold the record for the most like role playing game systems or like role playing games as an object featured on any actual play in the history of the art form.
I can't imagine anybody would even come close.
Uh, we did the digging. We did the looking at like who are shows that are in a similar space to us
Yeah,
that have run for as long as we have or longer. One shot is close at like one shots I think is like 200 or so, maybe like 160. Roleplay Public Radio is like 125, and then we're at like 300. So like we
yeah.
have we have we have clinched it.
Amazing. I mean, that's such a cool experience, right? Like I've hit that point in terms of playing games that I want that variety in how I play, right? Like
Sure.
I don't want the years long campaign anymore that I used to back when I was kind of first role playing. Like I want the new thing every week, and you get to experience that, which is so freaking cool.
It's great. I mean, that's why we started the show. It was like I had a bunch of games and I wanted to play more of them, and my wife, producer of the show, Jen Frank, was like, "Hey, like you listen to actual play podcasts. Why don't you just make one where you play a bunch of these games?" And I was like, "Well, okay, but what do we want it to be like about? Like, I don't just want to do it." And she's like, "Well, you have been researching two-player games for us. Why don't you just make a show about that?" And Party of One was born.
That's so cool. So, I mean, here's another question I have about this because it is an actual play, and you're trying, like you said, it's like a 90-minute experience that you're sort of
Mm-hmm.
crafting here. And I'm curious. I've always wondered how much prep you kind of formulate for some of these. Obviously, it's going to vary depending on the system and everything like
Sure.
that. But as I'm the sort of GM that generally is pretty low prep. I don't prep a lot. And I wonder in a scenario like with what you're doing, do you find that you are prepping more or less or about the same as what you would normally be doing for like your other sessions?
It does depend a lot on the system. Like there are games where I consciously like I will read through everything at least once before we get on mic to get a vibe of how much work it is going to take to get into it. Like
Yeah.
how much work it like the thing I never want to do is sit down with this. I never want to sit down with the system that I haven't read, get on mic and go, "Oh, this is trash and I hate it." Um so I will sit down with the system, give it a read, and go like, okay, I understand. Like, here's what's going to have to happen before I get on mic to make the thing work. Sometimes it is, oh, this is an experience that wants us to sit down and talk through prep things and make that part of like what the listener is hearing. Sometimes I have to sit down and go like, okay, these are kind of the set pieces that I want ready to go for the guest. I don't want to be trying to like build these things on the fly. So let
Right.
me like visualize, and then sometimes it's I put some toys in a toy box and go like, all right, how these things are going to crash together, we'll go from there.
That's cool. That's I mean, again, that's like variety, right?
Yeah,
That's the fun part about it. Is just every week you get to have that new experience. I
it,
mean,
it rules. I mean, it absolutely rules the joy of getting to like sit down and like enter into a different emotional space world, like all of these things really kind of starts when I'm cracking open that book and going like, okay, like what does it feel like to play,
mm,
not just play this game, but oftentimes for games that are not explicitly designed this way, like what does it feel like to play this game with just one other person at the table?
yeah, I'm really curious about that too because it is the show is a duet format, and you play a lot of games that are not explicitly written or as duet, or at least um, don't have things in the book that says like, here's what you need to consider if you're doing this with
Yeah.
just one GM and one player, or just two P or whatever, however the game works. And I'm curious, do you find that you're doing like a lot of design alongside the some of these games to like, are you finding that you have to like bring in some new tech to adopt these things, or do you just kind of just see what the pain points are and the exciting points are when you just see how it works with two people?
I'm finding like over time I found that I'm doing this less and less because as games continue to expand, as the art form continues to grow, like there are officially more games that are designed for just two people that I think we could ever spotlight on the show, which is a
Yeah.
pretty cool experience. But like when it comes to games that are not explicitly designed as such, I find that like it's it's sort of a middle ground between like whether I am building some piece of tech for it. Like there are some games that you have to like figure out like, okay, this has to be a mechanical thing that exists for this to work. And then sometimes it's more like story crafting. Like a
Mm-hmm.
good example is I don't know if this is the game that we're going to play, but I just pitched Mothership to a guest.
Okay.
I was like, we can play. I was like, put it on the list of like a potential game for us to play. Which is a game that does not feel well suited to just one person at the
Right.
table. So I was like, how do we? And it's not necessarily a tech thing, but like thinking that through logistically, like I was like, okay, what would need to happen for us to bring the sort of joys of that game experience to a single player? And I'm like, okay, the things that make that great are cramped spaces, fear, and the sort of like ramping up fear of a bunch of people in an enclosed space together facing horror together. So what I think my proposal for this is we may have the person makes four characters, they immediately split up in perfect horror movie fashion, and we play out four mini vignettes
Oh,
of each
love
player.
that.
So there's a little bit of like intercutting between stories and a little bit of like bouncing back and forth and going like, okay, you know that so and so failed to, turn on the life support, so you've gotten word of that, they have shut off their comms because they've been eaten by the monster. Can you get to the spacesuit? And like jumping between those stories to kind of like lock that in, I think is the approach. So it's not quite tech, but it's sort of like a story crafting approach. But then there's something that I should probably either release publicly or put back on my Patreon. I don't think it currently exists anywhere, and I'm very proud of it. Um, is like the two-player rules that we wrote for, or that I wrote for Monster of the Week, are like a good example of like tech building that I
Yeah.
did for like a game, because Monster of the Week, like a big part of that is the GM has a monster in mind, and you are doing moves to try and like understand who that monster is and how you kill it.
Right.
That really fundamentally like changes drastically if you are like a single protagonist. And also if we wanted to do like a GMless approach where we GM for each other, that doesn't really work.
Yeah, that gets tricky.
So like finding a way to structurally build out how you do that approach without knowing who the monster is in advance, and then partway through pause, collect all of the answers that you've given, and go, okay, cool, here's what we think the monster is. Which I realized recently, as I remembered this piece of tech was out there, I was like, oh, that's just Brindlewood Bay. Like I wrote a thing, and then Brindlewood Bay and Apocalypse Keys just came out and did it better later. And I would just, if I were to do it now, I would just go, hey, let's just take the fucking Brindlewood Bay
Yeah.
move and just port it into our game. It's just an easier way to do what we're trying to describe.
Sure. Sure. I mean, that. It sounds like, obviously, it sounds like a lot of fun playing the games. You get to play with different people, but then, as the designer in me also feels like it would just be kind of a fun puzzle every week too, to be thinking about like, okay, how can I best highlight what this game is about in this given format? What do I know works? What do I know is going to be something that I need to adapt or avoid or anything like that. I think that's a I I feel like that would be a fun puzzle.
There really is. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think that it really comes out. I like what you said about like knowing what, like, I like at this point I know what works and I know what doesn't. And I know like what not just works, but what makes good radio and what doesn't, right?
Mm,
Like there is the very common advice, especially around like party based adventure and action games, of which there are a few in our space.
one or
Um
two.
there's the very common advice of just give your character like a bunch of sidekicks and hirelings. Let them have like a bunch of supporting characters. And like that might be satisfying on an individual basis.
Mm,
Like for a home game, that might be a satisfying thing.
right.
Me talking to me is bad radio. Like me having scenes with myself or describing how characters do things while my guest kind of sits there is a bad recording for bad radio. Like that fundamentally does not really, it might be a good approach, but it doesn't quite connect when we're talking about making something as a performance.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly like you said. Like at a home game, in the comfort of your home with your friends or whoever it is you're playing with, that could totally work. That could be fine.
Yeah,
But yeah, as something that is meant to have that sort of performance and entertainment aspect, and the guest having to just sort of sit
that's also the thing. Like
there.
a big part of the show, and I think kind of to your point, like a big part of the show is, or a big part of like my job on the show, and a big part of like what makes the show really shine. I think like a big part of the puzzle piece as well is like I always say that my job is just to make my guest as comfortable as possible.
Mm,
Because like the nature of like what we are doing together, the
yeah.
nature of like what we are making as a show is remarkably intimate. It is outside of most people's gaming experiences. It is like a very unique thing. And like it brings with it a lot of nerves, and where the show shines is I always say that we are very adjacent to, or I've said this a lot in the last like 2 years or so, that we are very adjacent to interview shows in terms of
Mm.
like where we live as a podcast. We live closer to something like a Fresh Air or a Hot Ones than we do something like a Critical Role or a Dimension 20.
Yeah. I never really thought about it that way, but that's 100% true.
Right?
That's so cool. That's so cool to hear you. Was that always a goal of yours to have it like that, or did that sort of happen organically, where it just sort of it moved in that direction?
Very organically. You can hear in the very early episodes of the show, um and I say this with love towards myself. I say this having said this to the person that I am. You can hear me very hard trying to be James D'Amato on One Shot the first
Yeah.
like dozen or so episodes. You can hear me being like, this is the show that we are making, but with 2-player games. Like you can hear me pretty specifically. But like um part of it, it's like it's a thing that has happened organically, but it is also a thing that I think has always been, I think, on my mind a little bit. Like I've
Hmm.
always been, it's a thing that I think is very present without fully realizing it, and it's only kind of become like a thing I explicitly think about in the last maybe year or two, like
Okay.
2 to 3 years, like at the most. But like this sense of where that magic, because like when I think about a lot of the things I think about are like, as I make the show, as I've always made the show in the past 8 years of making the show, like the shows that I am listening to most frequently, both in tabletop and outside of it, were interview shows. Like that is the kind of thing that I've naturally been listening toward to and drawn towards. Uh I am the be this is we made it how far? What, 27 minutes into the interview before Jeff mentions the city of Philadelphia? I feel like that might be a record.
Yeah, wait a
Uh
minute.
I am blessed to live in Philadelphia, which means that we are the home base of Fresh Air, hosted by Terry Gross,
Mm-hmm.
the greatest to ever do it. So I get to I listen to like Fresh Air. I listen to, and Tabletop, like Backstory was a podcast that rewrote my entire brain. Like those shows of like interview shows were things that I was listening to and like engaging with, and like they were the ones that were kind of captivating me. And I think that naturally bled into the fact that the show is structurally a very similar format.
That makes, you're like, having you explain all of this suddenly is like putting things together about why I enjoy your show so much, because I also I don't tend to listen to many actual play shows or streams. Like that's how I initially absorbed the TTRPG scene when I was first kind of getting into it. I was just watching all of the APs and all the podcasts that were the high production
Mm-hmm.
actual plays, and then I found that I gravitated away from those towards the conversational shows, the shows that were interviews or design dives,
Mm-hmm.
and despite my moving away from APs, Party of One still sits on my playlist because it does scratch that itch of
It
something that
it
has that. And I was never able to articulate why until you sort of kind of put the pieces together for me here.
Can I tell you how often? Here's the thing, and this is genuine advice for anyone that is like making public facing art. Notice when you start to get the same feedback regularly and think about what it means. Because I can't tell you how often I heard that phrase or that exact statement before I really started to like lean into it and make it explicit. Like the number of times I heard people, and like for a long time it was a source of frustration for me because I couldn't like
Mm,
quite understand it, right? You know what I mean? Like I would hear people say, or like not even that I would hear people say this, because it was always a nice thing to hear people say, but like what I would hear is people would uh people like who I like existed in circles around. Like this is the interaction I had regularly, or I've
right.
had this enough times that the light bulb should have turned on and it did not for years. Was people be like, "Oh, I don't like actual play. Like, I don't. Actual play does nothing for me." And I'm like, "I know you listen to my show. Like, we've talked about it." And they're like, "Well, yeah, I listen to your show, but like, it's not the same. Like, there's a difference." And like, years I heard people say this, and
Mm.
like in my head, it did not internalize until probably like 2 years ago, where I was like, "Oh." Okay, I see what they're saying now. I get it. I get it now. Okay, I can lean into this and start to maybe position it in a way that I can do a thing that not a lot of shows do, which is like introduce people to actual play to TTRPGs,
Yeah, that's
which
a
is a goal. It is the ultimate goal of what we're doing here.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, 400 episodes at this point. You got another 400 in you at this point. You're gonna go for another 8 years. Gonna go on forever and ever.
I mean, we're going and we had said it was a Sunday night in 2015. We Jen and I were talking about the show. We had produced a handful of episodes, and we both kind of said, "Hey, this is fun. I think I want to give a run at this being like a weekly
Mm-hmm.
ongoing podcast. Let's do that until we get bored and burn out and don't want to do it anymore,
Sure.
and then we'll stop." I'm holding true to what
All
Jeff said
right.
8 years ago and making the show until I no longer wish to make it, and then we'll stop.
Way to go. Way to go. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, that then what a testament to the show that you're 400 episodes in, you're still having an awesome time. I mean, it's evident. Anybody who's ever listened to Party One gets it and understands, like, oh yeah, this sounds like a really fun time. Obviously, we have no idea about all the other stuff that goes on besides just the recording, that all the other work that goes into all of that,
Sure.
and that's where the burnout comes in.
That is
Right.
where the burnout
It's
that is where the burnout
it's
happens.
it's not the playing of the game; it's the all of the other nonsense.
It's the other stuff, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's super super cool. Um, so Party One, fantastic, cool stuff. What else are you like up to? What's got you excited these days besides Balatro? Right, we talked about Balatro
Balatro.
obviously being the most important thing in our lives right now. What do you got your eye on, or what are you doing these days? I'm just
What am I
curious.
doing these days? That's a really great question.
Ah, shit.
Oh, okay. Now suddenly everything stops. I am deep at work with a few big things that I'm very excited about. Like in terms of like what I'm working on that's exciting me is that we are in deep in the judging period for Minnesota Webfest, which I'm very excited about.
Mm.
2 years ago, or I guess this time last year, a little over a year ago, I took over as head of fiction podcasts and actual play productions at Minnesota Webfest, which is a film festival for podcasts. It's a film festival for web series and video content that expanded into podcasts, and actual play video streams. I am overseeing the audio half of that.
Very cool.
And we are like in the judging phase, which is like a tremendously exciting thing to be working on, because what that means is that I am listening to a bunch of little snippets of people's podcasts and streams and going like, oh, that's sick. Okay, yep, that's cool. I see this. I see the energy here. That's dope.
Like I remember like so like submitting for a podcast or something like that. I don't obviously I don't submit to anything for podcasts or anything, but I submit to the Ennies for my games, and part of that
Sure.
is podcasts is a category. And I think you get to submit something like a 15-minute segment or something like that. Is that how
Yeah,
it works, or is it something similar
Annie's
to that?
Annie's do 15 minutes. We ask for a 30-minute best of reel. We ask for a 30-minute
Oh,
show reel. It can be a single episode. Like if you are a fiction podcast where an episode is a half hour, you can submit a single episode. If you are a longer stream, you can either submit like a chunk of a single episode or a like an awards reel made up of a few different episodes all at once.
gotcha.
Um, the goal here is I want the best chance of loving your show as possible, and I want
Yeah.
my judges to have the best chance of loving your show as possible. So, like, taking a concise, and also I have to be respectful of the judges' time, especially because they are volunteering their time to listen to things and help build this festival. So, like, I have to be very respectful of their time, and a half hour, giving someone a half hour and being like, listen to this and tell me what you think is like a very I the average show being 90 minutes to 4 hours is a tough proposition to say to someone, here, listen to this and tell me if it's good.
Right. And for oftentimes for a lot of APs too, like outside of judging, it's like you got to listen to a few episodes before it really they can start to get in their rhythm. So dedicate like 12 to 15 hours of your life
Yeah,
before you
but
start
like
to.
give us a half hour of just like what makes your show different and cool and special, and then we can kind of like discern that out
Mm,
from there. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
one of the things that like we focus really hard on in terms of uh Minnesota Webfest is very aggressively judged, is what I will say. And that is because like I want a festive, when I think about like what I want from awards and from recognition and from curation, what I want is for that award to mean something
Mm,
beyond just you got a bobble, beyond just a bunch of people clicked yes, I vote for this person whose name I know. Like I
right.
wanted this to be a thing that has weight behind it, and for me that meant people who are working within the art form and know what the fuck they're talking about can look at a thing and say, hey, I see the I see what is happening here that makes it special and different. And that is really what I have been aggressively kind of trying to chase after with our judging. And so like our judges are universally people who make the content itself. Like we
Yeah.
have reached out to like a pool of other podcasters, other video streamers, other like other creators in podcasting and actual play to say who can confidently sit down and say like I don't need 15, people who like reasonably don't need 15 hours to listen to a thing and go like, okay, I hear that the production on this is great. I am
Right.
hearing that the performances are hitting. It feels a little directionless, but like they can key into those things on a very short thing because we make enough of our stuff that we have gotten comfortable.
Yeah.
It's the difference between we've been working in the space for a long time and we haven't. Like you can spot those things and not allow them to color your perception of the work as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah. This is this has suddenly brought me to another thing. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. Because you're talking about like judging, and judging is going to be sort of tangentially related to the idea of like reviewing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you are talking about you have experts in the field, right? These are people
Yeah,
who regularly produce the thing, so they can listen to a small segment of something, and then they can you feel pretty confident in their ability to make some sort of call on it. I
yeah,
100% buy into that. There's a whole conversation in the RPG space about reviewing games and whether or not you need to have played the game in order to review it, or if you can simply read a game and say, listen, I think this is good, or these are the things that I think are good and bad based off of my reading of the game. And what you're talking about has brought me into the thing that I think about, which is if you are someone who's been in the space for a while, either playing games or designing games for a long time, I feel pretty confident in my ability to read a game and be like, I think this is good or bad based off of my reading of the game. I don't need to play a 10-hour campaign or a 10-session campaign in order to make that call. But that's a really contentious issue. I'm curious if you see parallels or if I'm just sort of grasping at straws here in terms of a similarity between these things.
um well, obnoxious indie kid answer is reading is often its own form of play.
Yeah,
That's the heart of the lyric game movement, like the
sure.
idea that like you can play a game by reading it, by imagining, by allowing yourself allowing yourself the emotional space to experience these sort of like offerings that a game has. Like that is its own form of play. um I also tend to agree very strongly with you that like on a practical level, I can tell if a game is going to work for the show.
Mm,
I can read a game, I can read through the rules and go like, all right, I see what this is doing. This is going to translate to a bad experience for me to play it on Party of One.
right.
And like as critical as we try to be on Party of One, and as much as I try to leave in what I call an authentic picture of play, even when we stumble over rules or get something wrong and have to go like, oh, actually we got this wrong, like this was not laid, this was not conveyed in a way that was particularly clear, and we kind of messed this up. And like trying to give like an honest picture so that people can kind of step back and go like, okay, I see the struggle points of this game.
Mm,
We're also trying to choose games that give a good experience because this is a total tangent. I thought a lot about like what a like a negative review episode of Party of One would be, and I cannot emphasize enough that I think it might be the most unpleasant experience that has ever been put to microphone.
sure.
The idea of sitting down with someone, just like the two of us, and playing a game that we do not like and being like, this is bad, this like isn't giving us what we want, and like it would be bad to produce, it would be bad to listen to, and like can't do it. But like anyway, I can read a game and go like, this isn't going to work. I can see the mechanics because I've encountered similar mechanics, similar approaches, similar settings, similar themes before, and I can go like, this is either going to work really well or it's not.
Yeah.
I think that extends to play on the whole. Like I think that like I think there are probably, I think that there are benefits to sitting down with a thing and like playing it, meeting it where it's at, for lack of a
Mhm.
better way to put it. Like, I would never fully write off a game if it turned into a weird experience on party of one if it's meant to be played with a group of
Sure.
5, 6 people.
Sure.
And like I can read a game and go like, okay, I kind of see the energy and like I can see where this game is playing. I can imagine what the experience of sitting down for this is like. So like I tend to ultimately come down on the same side as you of like, while I would be hesitant to like wholly declare that a game is bad or like exceptionally good without sitting down with it at the table, you and I have also read and played enough games that I can confidently point at a stress point and say, yeah, okay, I've played and X number of games that have this interaction in them,
Right.
and they either work or they don't.
Yeah.
Like they either work or they don't. Like I can say like, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing. I've engaged in this mechanic enough times to be able to confidently say this is not going to work for me. Like I am going to become frustrated by this specific mechanical interaction. I know this. And yep, sure enough, you're using this mechanical interaction to bleed into this other interaction that I also know from X
Mhm.
number of other games. I know what is going to happen when I engage with these mechanics. And like it there is an energy of it's part of like experiencing a lot of art is being able to like step back and go like, okay, I see how this is. I can anticipate what I am going to experience by sitting down with this, by reading through the thing, which is in itself its own kind of play, by me reading through it and going like, okay, I understand.
Right.
I see what I'm working on and I see what I'm building towards, and it's not quite going to give me what I need.
Yeah. The analogy I oftentimes I think about when I think about this debate that I see is that like a well trained cook, or
Mm-hmm.
they don't even have to be trained, but just a vet, someone who's cooked for a long time
Yeah.
can look at a recipe and go, this is gonna work or this isn't gonna work by reading the recipe and reading the ingredients if they've got that sort of
Oh yeah.
background. And so like I use that sort of metaphor a lot when I think about like I think people who have that background, that expertise are like fully capable of looking at something and going like, I think just from my own experience from things, I think this might be a delicious cake or this cake might be hot garbage.
Yeah,
Just,
you can look at it. You can look at a cake and go. You can look at a cake and go, that like that amount of vanilla is going to overpower the entire thing. You
right.
can look at it and go like, or just as easily you can look at a piece of cake and go, or look at a cake recipe and go, I don't like that much vanilla. I'm gonna, Jen does this. Jen loves to cook. Cooking is Jen's great passion. And like I will talk to her about recipes and she'll be like, yeah, I pulled up this recipe. I have the number of chocolate chips in it because like what they were recommending was too many. Was like, she's like, I like my thing less.
Mm,
I like my cookies with a little bit less overwhelming amounts of chocolate. And she's like, so like I have the number of chocolate chips, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah.
She'll be like, or I up the amount of butter because I like a buttery or pastry or whatever. Like she will alter things, and she'll be like, I could tell that this was going to deliver something that was not quite what I wanted.
Right. Yeah.
And so like yeah, it's exactly the same thing. I can uh game game texts and recipes are an overlap that I find myself thinking about increasingly as time goes on. Game books as cookbooks is a
Yeah.
thing that I find myself thinking about fucking constantly. And it is the exact same experience. I can look at it and say, I know that I know that this mechanic is gonna throw off the recipe. I can remove it. I can remove it because the designer is not in the room with me. proverbially. Oftentimes, the designer is very literally in the room with me. But like, I can remove it. I can alter the recipe. But if I'm making this according to the book, I can imagine what this experience is going to give because I've got enough experience with the ingredients being played with.
Right. I'm so glad to have finally talked to somebody about this because this is just something that I think about all the time,
I think about it a lot. I think about it a lot.
and I've never had the chance to actually like articulate it with somebody. So I'm glad we got to do that.
Yeah.
What do you got going on the rest of this year, Jeff? We're not even halfway through the year yet. What do
Oh
you
my
got?
god, we're not even halfway through the
I
year
know.
yet.
Can you
It's
believe
it's
it?
it's been a long one. There's been a lot of stuff going. There's been some stuff. It's been a long year. Um, I am this week sending out a bunch of emails for the TTRPG Super Stream, which traditionally happens in May. Traditionally, would have happened next Monday
Mm-hmm.
had life not thrown me some curveballs. Is actually going to happen in July because life has thrown me some curveballs. But that is an annual charity fundraiser stream that I organize, raising money for LGBTQ issues. This year we are raising money for Advocates for Trans Equality, which is the organization that was formerly the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund. They merged with another organization that I don't remember.
Okay.
But they do a lot of things to support they do a lot of wonderful like legal support and financial support. A big thing that they do is they offer pro bono name change representation for
Oh,
like
great.
if you are filing a legal name change, if you are a trans person filing a legal name change, like they will give you they'll have a lawyer in the room with you, they'll help you fill out the paperwork, they'll do all of that pro bono. So like it is a wonderful way to help people live as their authentic selves and like get legal recognition for doing so.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
um and then we get to play a bunch of superhero games, and it's great. And like it is my annual excuse to play Anyone Can Wear the Mask, and then we get to play all of the other superhero games on my shelf. I've got some specific games that I'm building towards this year that I'm super hype about.
Are there some new ones that you haven't had a chance to play that you're gonna be
um
taking on?
there are. I've been like the casting and like organizing phase. I have pulled together a table of specifically superhero anime fans that I know to play Possible World Games Single Unique Power, that I'm
Nice.
so excited about, that I have here literally right here in front of me. This little bugger right here I'm so excited about because it is a superhero anime world building game, and I'm like, that's just going to be a great experience to just be like, you are 5 people that I know love superhero anime with all of your hearts. Please sit down at a table and be excited for 2 hours. Is the joy that, and like I have played it on a 2-player format, but I'm so excited. A game that I will scream about forever. I'm sitting down with I got a table of people that I'm pulling together for a game that I've shouted about before. I've shouted about it on Polygon. I am shouting about it here. I am so excited to get to play Masks of the Masks with like a full table of people, as a game that like I am mildly obsessed with and that has like completely taken over my brain. Masks of the Masks, which is this month's, I think, Zine Club offering.
Oh, okay.
Shout out for a project that I'm not involved in, but like I will shout out anyway that you should go grab it. Mask of the Mask is a GM-less, powered by the apocalypse, kind of belonging outside belonging hybrid game
Okay.
that is specifically evoking like Bronze Age superhero comics like Watchmen. The entire rule book is a full color, fully illustrated comic book that doubles as a rule book.
What?
Like all of the rules
The
are
whole
like,
thing?
I'm gonna throw a link
Yeah.
into the Google Meet chat so you can see this specifically. I need you to like see just the actual itch page that has some of the it has on it, you can see the what you need to play section is one of the featured images. And it is like
Wow.
a 9-panel grid that is like, here's the tools of the trade. Here's what we have. we've, to answer these questions, we need the tools of the trade: at least 2 6-sided dice, some tokens, something to write with, and 2 to 5 masks. And it is drawn as like a comic book sequence of a superhero like getting ready for action. It's so fucking cool. It is so mind blowing. The actual writing in it is spectacular. The actual design is like uh mind blowing. It is sick. It is unbelievable. It makes me I
I think you might be
scream.
excited about this one.
I'm so excited for it. I'm so obsessed with this game. I just want to scream about it forever.
I mean, what a cool format. I mean, that just looks spectacular.
As a piece of art, like the first time I looked at it, it took my breath away of just like, oh my god.
That's really really cool. So you get to play that with a group of folks. You
I've
got
got to pulling some people together for
yeah.
that. I've got single unique power. We're busting out Aaron Lim's The City of Shining Stars, which is a wonderful game that I love with all of my heart. Like we're doing some like I'm being very intentional with my casting this year of like who do I want at each individual table, specifically to be like these are games that I want to play. Who are the amazing creators that I'm lucky enough to be friends with, who I think like if I sat them all at a table would transcend to a different plane of existence. And that's the energy that we're bringing to the table.
That's the perfect energy. So that's gonna happen in July then.
That's going to happen mid-July. The date may card subject to change,
Sure.
but aiming for mid-July. We're aiming to record stuff in June. I'm so excited about it. It's a thing that I genuinely look forward to every year because it is a bunch of games that I like with people that I admire that also it raises money for a good cause.
Yeah, that sounds really really cool. Can't wait to check that one
I'm
out.
excited.
I mean, so you are in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Are you going to PAX? Are you a PAX person?
I am like slowly back to being a PAX person. The last few years, this year was the first year I went back.
Uh-huh.
I have come like I like PAX a lot as a convention. I think it's great. I think it's a wonderful event. At the very least, what I will say is that I am a hang around outside of PAX and meet up
Nice.
with people at meetups. Uh, that whether or not I commit to the actual convention again,
Yeah.
I can fully commit to hanging around outside the convention and meeting up with people later.
Perfect.
Like that's because it's Center City, Philadelphia. It is my favorite city in the world, and it is a 20-minute trolley ride from my apartment. So like having a bunch of my friends in the city for a weekend 10 minutes from my house is a pretty good proposition.
That's pretty nice. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to PAX. We'll be there again this year, so it's always a good time. Like it's exhausting running the booth all day, but then the
Mhm.
hanging out with people afterwards is always just very delightful. I have like an annual tradition at this point of sitting down with Adam Bell and playing some new Oink game, whatever new Oink game is the one that everyone's playing that year, and then just shouting and screaming and having a really good time. So I'm looking forward to some PAX in December.
I do. I am excited about it. I had a similar experience. I had a similar experience where one of the highlights of this year's PAX for me was sitting down. I here's the okay. Listen. Before I say what I'm about to say,
Uh
I need to say PAX is a sacred space.
huh. Sure.
PAX is neutral ground. PAX is a place where PAX is a place where people come together.
Sure.
So I need the internet to recognize these things before I say what happened at PAX. Um, I sat down with one Viditio Valetti and we played
Mm-hmm.
some Oink games and it was a wonderful experience. This does not change the animosity that exists between me and one Viditio Valetti.
Sure, of
This does
course.
not change the ways that Viditio Valetti as an individual has wronged me by never once asking to appear on Party of One.
Not once.
Not once. But in the spirit of community
Yeah.
and collaboration, we sat down and played some What games at PAX, and it was a highlight of the convention.
It's very big of you. I'm really glad that PAX could do that for you.
Miracles happened that weekend.
Well, that's awesome. So yeah, you've got you got your awesome event in July, possibly some pack stuff.
Yep.
Anything else that you got going on this year that you're like super excited about?
I think it's that. I think it's those. It's Minnesota. It's Big
Nice.
Bad Con. It's a lot of like stuff, and then it's
When's
coming up
Big Bad Con again?
end of October if I remember correctly.
I gotta get to this con. I've not been to it yet, and it sounds fantastic. Every time
It's a
I read
it's a
about
good
it and hear
vibe.
about it, yeah.
It's a really good vibe. It's a good energy. I like it a lot. I think like for smaller cons, it's one of the few that I feel truly ride or die on at this moment. I'm
Okay.
pretty excited for it this year. Um, and then yeah, it's I mean, Party of One is proceeding onward as it will, and it will continue forward. I mean, we're at May now, and it's 9 years in October, which is
Wow.
fuck. I don't
Wait,
really know what else to say other than fuck.
I feel like I was just looking at your Twitter to see what the latest episode is. It with Quins?
The latest episodes with Quins. We played First Dig Two Graves by a couple of Drakes.
Nice.
We told the story of Quins put it really well, where he said, our role playing games allow us to indulge in anything. So, like, for example, what if I was what if I was an obnoxious entitled reviewer? Our game was a shitty pizza shop owner having an ultimately fatal rivalry with an angry Yelp review, which we both like was so cathartic for both of us to just like laugh about like angry online reviews for an
Right.
hour. Real magic. When I talk about like Party of One is an interview show and like you get to experience guests like in their element, there's
Yeah.
something joyful to me and Quinn's both laughing about like the work that goes into making something and the existence of just angry screaming on the internet. And the catharsis there I think is magic.
Yeah, that's very good. That's fantastic. Awesome. Well, Jeff, I've run out of coffee, so that's about when we usually wrap this up. That sounds like a great episode. Where can people find that episode and all your other cool stuff?
You can find Party of One at partyofonepodcast.com. You can find me on Twitter, as long as that's still a fucking website, at Party of One Pod. You can find me other places on the internet at Jeff Stormer, so like Blue Sky, Tumblr, pretty much anywhere that there's a Jeff Stormer or a Party of One podcast, that's me. In theory, you can find me at jeffstormer.com, but that website is under construction because I have to rebuild it because it kind of crapped out on me. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, otherwise, I think those are all of the things to shout out.
Those are some fantastic things to shout out. Thank you so much, Jeff, for
Thank you.
coming.
This was magic. This was great.
This was magic, right? Now well, first of all, I'm excited to go listen to this episode because I can't wait to hear this this confrontation between the pizza shop owner and the reviewer.
It's great. It's really funny. It goes a lot of places.
Excellent. But yeah, like we said at the beginning, like this gets me excited for the week.
I'm
This
so
show
excited.
always amps me
Likewise.
up. Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm actually, speaking of cooking, I'm gonna be doing a bunch of cooking today. We're gonna go do some Mother's Day stuff. And then gonna just hit the well, here's the thing. I'm gonna try and design, but we also talked about Balatro, so who knows what's actually gonna happen to me tonight.
I'm gonna do a run, and then I'm gonna do a run, and then we're gonna have breakfast, and then I'm gonna like get to work. I've
Yeah.
got like I got a lot of emails to send. It turns out running a festival is primarily sending emails. So I got a bunch of emails to send. I got an episode to edit, but I'm gonna get a run in first and foremost. I gotta try out this 2-suit deck. I gotta see if it
gotta
works.
make it happen. Well, thank you folks for watching, listening, all that good stuff. If you caught this midstream or anything like that, the VOD will be up on Twitch and YouTube. And then I'll be back next week for more Coffee Break. I'll be sitting down with Logan Dean, who got name dropped earlier. So probably going to be talking about Balatro some more. So hopefully you enjoyed that segment because we're going to do some more Balatro talk next week.
Fuck yeah.
Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.